Those of you who know me in real life know that I find the most obscure things interesting. You probably heard me get super into the history of mealtimes, clapping, and eating utensils before, just to name a few examples. It's this trait that's led me to this topic. It came to me when I was walking in front of a grocery store last summer, and saw stacks and stacks of bags of topsoil outside, and thought to myself, where's the soil coming from? If every major grocery store has this many bags of soil or more, then how many do we have left? Can the soil be used in places where it's more needed? I'm sure if I'd ever tried to talk to someone about this in person, all I'd get is a long, drawn-out groan of boredom. Which is a shame, because soil and agriculture is a topic that is way too important to be boring. It's what makes or breaks a country's economy. If you look at some of the poorest nations in the world, you'll notice a very prominent trend, and that is that their soil quality is either extremely low or entirely non-existent. Not only that, but soil also helps us in other ways, albeit a rather unimportant one. Which is, the fact that it literally provides us with food. So clearly soil is a huge topic of importance, but it's always so boring to learn about. Don't believe me? 3 years ago when I was in grade 9, I showed up to class late on a Monday. Now during that semester, my homeroom, as well as my first class, was geography. And when I came to class with my textbooks in hand, I noticed that, nobody was there. I got scared, I got confused. I wondered if they had been sucked into an alternate dimension and needed help from me. But I was too lazy to help. So I just stood there and read about dirt and soil from my textbook while I waited for them to come back. Turns out that there was a meeting that day with our high school orientation mentors, which was being held in the gymnasium. But that's not what's important. What's important here was what I was reading about. Soil. And the problem is, I recall absolutely nothing about what it said because it was just that boring. But that doesn't have to be the case. As I said earlier, soil is too important to be this boring, which is why someone has to make it interesting. And that's where I come in, because I'm going to try to fix that and make it not boring. Before we begin, we should probably first have an understanding of how much soil we have left at the current moment. To answer that question, we currently have about 1.33 acres of arable, which means usable, soil per person. However, it's estimated by the year 2039, there will only be an average of 0.59 acres left per person. Now this is in Canada. In the world, we currently only have 0.57 acres per person, and an estimated 0.49 acres per person in 2040. It should also be noted that there is more soil in the world than this, but 72% of that is unusable. Okay, so we're going to have that much soil per person left, but what can we actually grow with 0.49 acres? Well, in terms of lettuce, we can estimate that you can grow about 9,800 heads of it a year with that amount of land. You could also grow about 96 bushels of corn in 0.49 acres as well. That's equal to about 3,360 pounds of corn. It is approximated that each person eats about 4.9 bushels of corn a year. That doesn't sound like too much of a problem, does it? But you have to realize that people eat way more than just one crop a year. So if you were to grow 0.49 bushels of corn, how much space would you have? Well, 4.9 is about 5% of 96, so you'd be losing 5% of your land solely on corn. You would then be left with 0.466 acres of land. But what about your other crops? What about carrots and potatoes and peas and beets and everything else that we consume? Each crop that you have will slowly chip away at the 0.49 acre farm. Not only that, but what about the meat that many of us eat? They don't just live their lives eating nothing, they too need some sort of nutrition. Now it's recommended that cows eat grass, and the soil that grass grows on has to come from somewhere. And you know where that is? On your hypothetical farm. That's more space taken off from your farm where your crops could have grown. Also, as time goes on, the quality of the soil on your farm will start to go down, which means that each year, you're going to be able to grow less and less crops and raise less and less livestock. Are you starting to see the problem now? So now we know about how much soil we have left, but I think it would be extremely beneficial if we investigated the exacts of our rate of soil loss. According to the World Wildlife Federation, or the WWF, half of the planet's topsoil has been lost in the last 150 years due to soil erosion. Soil erosion is a huge issue in the world of agriculture and is defined as a natural process of a degradation of topsoil due to water and wind. However, there are also non-natural causes of soil erosion that we, as humans, cause. The three most predominant non-natural causes of erosion, according to the WWF, are deforestation, overusage, and agriculture, such as pesticides and other sprays. Now, loss of good soil isn't the only impact of soil erosion. Instead, soil erosion actually ties in with so many other topics. These include flooding, clogged waterways, and environmental changes for the ecosystems involved. The Amazon is one place which is severely affected by this erosion, which is being caused by the massive amounts of deforestation occurring there, which has thus had an impact on their ecosystem and environment around them. Anyways, That's enough on soil erosion. Back to the rate of soil loss. As I said earlier, the world has lost about half of its topsoil in the past 150 years. A third of the world's soil has been used up in the past 40 years. Continuing this trend could end up in extreme amounts of soil loss, where the amount of soil lost in that 40-year period is condensed into a period of only a few years. Great, so we're losing soil, and fast. What does that mean? Will we eventually run out of soil? What will happen then? Should we be worried? The short answer is that yes, we are going to run out of soil, and what will this lead to? A lot more problems than you think. If we continue down this path, there will be a lot of reasons to worry. Each country is going to be impacted in some way, and it will be worse in some places than others. More populous countries like China and India will be impacted the most. This is because they require more food to feed their population, which will be scarcer as the amount of available farming soil decreases and their population increases. Also, over time, the amount of water retention the soil has will decrease, leading to worse soil, meaning that less crops can be grown. This leads to an increase of food prices. So, to surmise, as countries begin to require more and more food to grow a growing population, the amount of available food will go down and the prices will go up. It's really a perfect storm, isn't it? Oh, but we're not even done yet. Remember that soil map I brought up at the start of the video? We'll take another look at it. See the countries that don't have as much usable soil? What's going to happen to them? At first you might say, well, nothing, they already have pretty bad soil, so how would they be affected? Well, they are going to be affected. A lot. Currently, these countries rely on imports of food from other parts of the world in a similar fashion to how countries like Canada gets tropical fruits shipped to them to sell in their stores. But here's the problem. As I showed earlier, countries with poor soil tend to have a poor economy. So when the price of food goes up, how are these countries going to be able to manage to import it then? The answer is that, unfortunately, they won't be. This is going to lead to yet another refugee crisis as people are forced to leave their countries in search for food and places that can provide adequate food. As the world delves into chaos, another problem is going to start to get even worse, and that's rising sea levels. As soil starts to lose retention as a result of deteriorating quality, the water added to it from irrigation begins to leak out and run off into streams, which eventually reach the ocean and seas. According to recent studies, more than 50% of the cause of rising sea levels since the 1960s has been due to a loss of water retention. And that number will only increase as soil quality goes down. By the time this happens, a majority of the world will be hit in the face from a silent killer finally showing itself that they didn't even know existed because it's so boring of a topic. And all in all, it's gonna look like this. Now back to my original question about how many bags of topsoil we can sustainably sell. I plugged some numbers into a topsoil calculator, finding out how many square feet were in 0.49 acres, being that there are about 21,344 square feet, and found out that I would need about 28,500 bags of 0.75 square feet covering bags of topsoil, which weigh about 30 to 40 pounds each, if the soil was a foot deep throughout the farm. Now this might sound like we have a ton of topsoil to sell, but think about it this way. If each store sells thousands of bags of topsoil a year, every year, and there are tens of thousands of different individual locations around the world, this shows that there is some kind of danger in the amount of soil we have left, as this soil is being used primarily for recreational purposes, such as home gardening. This here is another part of the equation that is slowly but surely chipping away at the amount of soil we have left for agricultural use. Now, just to really drive home the point of how important soil is, I would like to bring up the various aspects in which soil impacts our lives. What does it provide us? The one I was focusing on most in this video was that it provided us with food, but that barely scratches the surface of its function. Without soil, there would be no place for cotton to grow, meaning that clothing as well as different types of household fabrics such as bed sheets would not be as easily available. Secondly, there would be fewer trees, which means less wood would be available. What do we use wood for? Well, everything when you think about it. We use it for pencils, paper, housing, furniture. Wood is basically a necessity to humans at this point. Speaking of trees, many animals rely on them to create homes, and without them, these animals will start to move closer and closer to human settlements, which thus would be affecting our safety as a society as a whole. Soil, or at least good soil, also helps to maintain sea levels. As mentioned before, soil with low water retention rates causes water runoff, which means that the irrigation used flows into streams and rivers and eventually finds their way into seas and oceans. Now that doesn't sound like it would cause that much harm. I mean, it's just a little bit of water seeping into a stream, which would then get into this huge ocean. What's that gonna do? Well, I already mentioned that since the 1960s, this has been 50% of the cause of rising sea levels. Clearly, soil is essential to society and provides us with food, clothing, shelter, and an environment, among other things which I barely can even talk about in this video without making this video at least 30-40 minutes long. Without it, humanity and life as a whole would basically be in peril. So what can we do to conserve soil? Well, for one, we can stop overusing soil to allow it to naturally heal, giving microorganisms within the soil a chance to digest the leftover fibers from harvest to convert it into a nitrogen, a key element to the soil's health. Another tactic that has been used around the world since historic times is crop rotation. Crop rotation is the act of alternating between different crops to farm each season or year. This has many positive effects such as soil maintenance, nutrient recycling, and pest or weed control. Different crops have different roots, meaning that deep-rooted plants can help suck excess water and nutrients trapped deeper into the soil that shallow-rooted plants cannot reach, as well as break up clump soil found deep within the ground. The variation of nutrients from the crops also gets into the soil, improving its quality and effectiveness. Also, since the crops are being alternated each year, there's a smaller chance of them all being affected by the same pest or disease, which will reduce the usage of agrochemicals on the farm, lowering the rate of soil erosion. The method of crop rotation, if used more frequently and more widespread, could help improve the longevity and quality of soil worldwide. Thirdly and finally, we can monitor how much water is put into soils. Soil erosion plays a huge role in the loss of soil worldwide, and if managed, could drastically improve our future outlook on our soil situation. Places which receive high amounts of precipitation do not need as much additional irrigation, which also applies to soil that is found immediately on water body banks. Managing how much water a soil gets and is affected by is probably the biggest step farmers can take to ensuring a sustainable future when it comes to soil. Using these three methods are probably our best bets to conserve soil for as long as possible, because let's face it, we can't live without it. So what have we learned? We learned that we only have 0.59 acres of arable soil per person in the world right now. And we learned that that number is on the decline. We learned that our future projections of soil won't be able to do that much for us when it comes to growing food. The amount of soil we do have left is going to decrease per person as the global population increases and the effectiveness of that remaining soil decreases, as its quality diminishes over time. From there, we investigated the main factors that reduce soil quality worldwide. This effect was labeled as soil erosion, and was naturally caused by the effects of soil and wind, and unnaturally caused by the use of agrochemicals such as pesticides and weed killers, and through the process of deforestation and the overuse of soil. We discovered that the effects of soil erosion were not only contained to farming, but also impacted the surrounding ecosystem and the natural flow of water around that environment, leading to clogged waterways and even flooding. The impacts of soil erosion are also getting more severe as time goes on, increasing the rate of arable soil loss per year every year. Based on this, it is expected that we will eventually run out of soil if nothing is done to control or conserve that soil we have left, and this can lead to a lot of problems. Prices of food would go up and more people would be left hungry. This means that more populous countries would have more trouble satiating their inhabitants, which would also have drastic effects on the poverty rates and the economy rates of those countries. Places with poor soil and low GDP would no longer be able to import food from other countries, which would lead to a refugee crisis, as citizens of those countries would be forced to migrate to other countries in order to get food. Seas and oceans would also rise as soil would lose its water retention, thus leading to a flow of irrigation from farms into streams and rivers, and eventually into oceans and seas, which poses a high contribution to rising sea levels. We also briefly described the things other than food that would be affected by the loss of soil, and discovered that there are a lot more ways than we think that soil impacts our lives, especially pertaining to clothing, shelter, and urbanization. If you lost soil, the price for the base material of clothing and housing would increase, which would slowly but surely up the cost of these necessities. It was thus made clear that soil is necessary for the success and well-being of humankind, which raised the all-important question of how do we conserve soil? 3 different examples of practices which can conserve soil were listed and explained, being reducing the stress put onto soil yearly, practicing crop rotation, and monitoring factors which induce soil erosion, and then adjusting farming tactics based on those factors. By applying these techniques to farming of any kind, we can drastically slow down the rate at which we lose usable soil, thus helping us in the long run. Soil is a topic that nobody is willing to talk about, because it simply isn't an attractive topic. But we as a society need to change that, because one way or another, soil is going to run out if we don't change our ways, and not very many people will see it coming. Soil erosion is a silent killer that we completely have the opportunity to identify. We just need to spread awareness of it first.